Hey folks, and welcome to the Salty Seaman spoiler review, references, nods, everything you need to know about The Dark Tower. Movie just came out, of course, is based on the 8-novel cycle by Stephen King. My absolute favorite book series of all time. Hence, like, I know my channel has more gone of a military bent, as opposed to originally it was kind of a pop culture thing, but you know, a million people do it. But this being my favorite series of all time, I have to continue anything that goes on with Roland, his quartet, and sometimes lack thereof. So in this review, I'm going to give my overviews, comparison to the book, whether or not you can go watch the movie cold, what fans can expect, and of course all the nods and references to Stephen King and his works, and of course the big question I came out of this movie is, will there be some kind of Stephen King cinematic universe out of this? So stay tuned. Salty Seaman's got all the deets right here for you. All right, now right off the bat, I'm going to say I really dug the movie. I'm biased. I mean, this is my favorite book series of all time. Seeing any of this on the big screen's going to make me squee like a little schoolgirl. Just putting that out there. However, I'm going to say it's a damn good movie if you're a fan. The critics are raking this over the coals, and I don't disagree with their criticism of it. This movie, if you are cold on this, it does feel rushed. You are thrown into this world and all the problems going on. There's no slow burn. There's no slow build, which we did get in the books, because they're basically trying to keep this as a if it needs to be a one-shot with a beginning, middle, and end. There's decent closure for the storyline. If this is all they ever do, you can walk out of the movie theater happy. However, they just kind of rush into it so much. If you're completely cold on it, which a lot of critics, of course, were, and that's why they gave it a bad review, just it's hard to just get through everything going on in this movie. That said, I went and saw this with a friend who had a decent understanding of the King universe. Never read the books, but through pop culture osmosis, you know, he kind of knew the story, and he really enjoyed it. I had another friend. I made comments on my Facebook page. He knew nothing about it. He went and saw it just on the strength of the actors, and it looked cool, and he really enjoyed it. So maybe that bodes well for it at the box office, despite the critics. I mean, the fucking Emoji Movie was like #1 at the box office last week, and the critics destroyed it. So that's not always a good judge of how good a movie is compared to, you know, what the fans like. I'll say this: there's enough action in here. Idris Elba's playing the gunslinger, Roland Deschain, son of Stephen, and you know, there's enough scenes of him just being a fucking badass gunslinger, exactly how you want Roland to be if you're a fan. That'll satisfy them. Plus, Matthew McConaughey playing the Man in Black, a.k.a. Walter Opatic, a.k.a. The Good Man, Farson, a.k.a. Roland Flagg, Ronald Flagg, I'm sorry. He's playing the character so well. We actually see more of him in this movie than we have in any of the books, minus The Stand. But, yeah, I think those two did an amazing job, but the story is really focused on Jake. The way this movie goes, there's a lot of, you know, mishmash of the books. This is not following book one all the way through whatsoever. We get a lot of, and speaking of, I should have mentioned at the beginning, spoilers. There's a lot of fucking spoilers in here for the books, for the movie. If you don't want to be spoiled from any of that, please turn this off. That's your only warning. Don't want to hear you bitch in the comments. So, moving on. Yes, Jake is more of the focus of this movie. It's kind of taking parts of book one and parts of book three, where Jake comes back to Roland, and kind of putting them together, and he's having these visions, and he's seeing the Man in Black, he's seeing this tower, and he starts seeing this gunslinger. And New York and everywhere around the world are having these weird earthquakes. You know, New York's not a place that has earthquakes. And this is because the Man in Black and his breakers, these people with psychic powers, are trying to break the tower that's at the center of the universe that holds all of reality together. We get two versions of Earth in this universe. We get Keystone Earth, which they use a lot, which really wasn't used in the books, referring to our Earth. And then there's Midworld. That's where Roland and the Gunslinger and the Man in Black and all those things are from. You know, that's where they're trying to break the tower. So we get between those two worlds. We have Idris Elba playing Roland the Gunslinger. He does a great job screen presence. I just talked about it today. You know, as a kid, I saw him as Clint Eastwood because that's kind of how he was built, and it's kind of how the artwork. He was basically Paul Newman and Clint put together. So I always kind of grew up with that image in my head. You put a black man in there, it's like, oh, you're kind of messing with my headcanon. But at least they picked, a fucking amazing guy to do it. He has great just screen presence. He screams badass. My biggest nitpick with him is not him. It's more of the dialogue he's given. Roland has a very specific, peculiar dialect that is not quite our normal native American English. It has a lot of extra words and weird phrases and turns of phrases. We don't get enough of that. That to me, that always made Roland a little more of an outsider. I assume it's for movie purposes. They didn't want to alienate people by doing that. But we do get a lot of references. He does, long days and pleasant nights. We don't get a, for your crops. That kind of sucked. But, one woman he runs into says, "Thank you, Cy." There's cool little shit like that. And, of course, the Gunslinger's Prayer, which is in the trailer, so everyone knows that if you're a fan, that's already in there. So a lot of those little touches on there. The kid playing Jake is fucking great. I think he did a great job. The movie kind of is focused on him. They changed his backstory a bit. He's no longer a neglected rich kid. He's his dad, who's alive in the books, is dead in the movie. He has a stepfather and a mother who's worried about him because of all these nightmares he's been having, and he believes they're real, and of course they are real, and they're trying to send him to a sanitarium, which of course is ran by the Man in Black and the Breakers, and him escaping from them and trying to get to Roland's world. There's some references here I'll get to at the end when I talk about the references and whether or not a lot of these are building towards more of a Stephen King centric franchise here. But regardless, we talk about the Man in Black. Matthew McConaughey is my favorite part of the movie. The guy I went and saw this movie with was not a fan of his performance in this. He is a big fan. He's read and watched The Stand. He knows his character as Roland Flagg. There, he wasn't down with it as much as I was. He thought he felt off. I didn't at all. I felt it was the character. It maybe could have been a little more mischievous, and he kind of has that gleeful mirth to him. But regardless, I thought Matthew McConaughey did great. We see a lot of his powers. We see a lot of just what a fucking badass villain he can be. And I thoroughly enjoyed his performance most of all. I mean, that was the clicker for me, made this movie work. Now, that aside, I love the movie. If you're a fan of the book, I'd definitely recommend checking it out. It's an interesting continuation of the cycle. If you know how the last book ends, Roland starts his quest again. So this is really a sequel to the books. And I think it's a fine sequel. I really want to see more and let them breathe and flesh out more. But the fun thing for Stephen King fans and Dark Tower fans is just spotting all the little stuff from these books and other books and just being Stephen King. So I thought I'd point out a few things. If you've already seen the movie, maybe you missed it, maybe you didn't. Maybe you have some I didn't catch. Please tell me in the comments. But I thought I'd list a few right here. One of the things off the bat, like the main villain is the Man in Black, Walter, whatever you want to call him. He goes by his birth name, Walter Paddock, which is revealed way late in the books. Before that, we knew him as Walter, the Man in Black, Randall Flagg from The Stand, just plain Flagg and Eyes of the Dragon. Here, he's referred to by his birth-given name. He's kind of positioned as, the be-all, end-all bad guy, but people who read the books, of course, know he answers to a higher power, a creature called the Crimson King, and he is not completely absent from this movie. We see graffiti that says, "All hail the Crimson Eve," "All hail the Crimson King" with the eye. There's graffiti about that all over the place. Not to mention, at one point, he's talking to two of his servants, who said, "How can we serve him, not you?" Because they're addressing him. They don't say, "How can we serve you?" They say, "How can we serve him?" Which I think is a very direct reference to the Crimson King. This is obviously for later sequels, if any get made, TV series and whatnot. The phrase "Ka" never mentioned once in this movie that I caught. Maybe I missed it in the background somewhere, but it is not said. I think this is a bad overlook. I think maybe they're trying to cut out too much weird mid-world dialect. I mean, so we got Long Days, Pleasant Nights, we got Thank You, Sai, a few other things, but there's no talk of Ka, which is their version of fate. The closest we get is Man in Black mentions the wheel, and one of the phrases in the book is "Ka is a wheel." It's the closest we get. Hopefully, if the Hulu miniseries of the flashback to Roland goes through, like I assume that phrase is going to be popped up a lot more. In terms of the Man in Black, he has mooks in this movie. These are the Taheen, who don't show up until, I believe, Song of Susanna. These are basically the vampires, the creatures of not really human. They're wearing fake faces. It's very explicit. There's the rat guy. Can't remember his name, but I know he's in Song of Susanna. We first meet them in Low Men in Yellow Coats from Hearts of Atlantis. Yeah, they were his mooks. You know, like, Roland's got to kill somebody in this movie, right? So he fucking goes on a tirade through two different worlds, blasting these fools fucking apart. It's fucking great. So, you know, a little, again, the books are mishmashing around, and I think that's a fine jump. I think if Stephen King had thought about the Taheen in the beginning, he would have included them earlier in the books. But, I mean, he wrote these over, you know, a couple of decades. Of course, he's also tying to the vampires from Salem's Lot, which there is no mention of. There's not the priest is not there. There's no any kind of subtle hints towards it. But again, stuff you could do later. There are also from the later books, especially Book 7 and The Black House, a side book to the main series, as the Breakers. Also, Low Men in Yellow Coats. One of the main characters is a breaker. They are in the movie. They're never referred to though, and part of the plot is Man in Black wants to take Jake and make him a breaker. They never refer to them as breakers, but the credits when they roll, they say Breaker 1, Breaker 2. So, kind of funny they don't actually use the terminology. Speaking of credits, there's on the IMDb page for the movie, there's a credit for someone playing Susan Delgado, which is Roland's great love from back when he was a teenager. She is not in the movie at all, so I assume this is a part that got cut. It was some flashback that they decided they didn't need. But again, that is definitely fuel for a flashback miniseries, is the whole story of going to the Hambries with Roland's quartet and meeting Susan. Speaking of flashbacks, not a lot in this movie. You only get a couple. We meet at the Battle of Jericho Hill, which is not mentioned by name, but it's very much the Battle of Jericho Hill if you're familiar with the books. And it's Roland and his father's Stephen, their last stand. Stephen is played by, I don't think they mentioned him by name either, but we know he's Roland's son of Stephen, Stephen Deshane. It's played by, I can't remember the name of the actor, but the guy who played President Palmer in 24. It's fucking great. He plays Roland's dad, and it shows them at their final battle at Jericho Hill, running into the Man in Black. Not quite what happened in the books. I never read the comics, which I believe the Battle of Jericho Hill is in the comics. I should do that someday. But other than that, yeah, nothing. We get none of the quartet. We don't get Court. If I had to guess, Court and Stephen will be combined into one character. Stephen will be his mentor. We won't get crusty old Court, which kind of sucks, depending on what they do if and when they mash them together. Now, and last of all, here are some nods to the Stephen King universe as a whole. Greatly tickled every time I see this stuff. Some of these are Dark Tower, some are from other books, some and movies, some who are not explicitly tied to the Dark Tower universe. but it was fun to see. One of the first ones, right at the beginning of the movie, you see a couple walking a St. Bernard in New York City. Fucking Cujo, right off the bat. At some point, Jake and his friend are sitting in his room, and his friend's playing with a red Plymouth Fury. Fucking Christine. Also not directly tied into the books, but a nice little touch for the Stephen King fan. Once they're in Midworld, we go to a couple different locations. One of them is a village. The village is below what is basically the Outlook Hotel from The Shining. And speaking of, the Breakers and their psychic powers, they are referred to as having the Shine, which is a very direct reference to the Shining and its sequel, Doctor Sleep. So this, once again, we now have a very direct tie to The Shining being in the Dark Tower universe, which originally was not. If you look at the what was originally considered the tie-in books, in the original, when the books came out, there was a list of by the author, and in the Dark Tower books, they always put in bold books that tie in. The Shining originally wasn't in it. But since Doctor Sleep came out and there's its own new universe, they're obviously making that part of the Dark Tower universe and part of the bigger Stephen King universe, which we'll get to. This was in the trailer if you were at a sharp eye, but it's just to reiterate, another old place they go to in Midworld is an old rundown amusement park. Of course, Midworld is basically our Earth thousands of years in the future after some apocalyptic event, and the amusement park's called Pennywise. Obviously, a direct reference to it. It was also one of the trailers I saw before the movie. No direct ties, but of course, if you know, they are tied together with a turtle and everything. And also part of my coming on theory about the Stephen King universe. Another thing at the amusement park, there's a blink and you'll miss it little nod to one of the later books, The Wastelands. You'll see what, as far as I'm concerned, is Charlie the fucking Choo-Choo. Charlie the Choo-Choo, run down and broken. They just kind of pan over it. If you don't know what you're looking for, you'll miss it. But I caught it and I just squeaked with glee. Because hopefully we see Blaine the Mono in one of the later parts of this story. The number 19, which becomes a big part in the later books, is right off the bat. When they're trying to use these buildings, when they're trying to cross into other worlds, the code for Midworld is 1919. That's, straight out of the books right there. The Dixie Pig, also from Song of Susanna, is where the Taheen has kind of their headquarters in New York. We get like I said, we don't have Susan, so we don't have Susanna, we don't have Eddie. Again, hopefully they're coming later. I can't imagine not doing this story without the naked battle at Salazar's place. It has to fucking happen, just like Blaine the Mono fucking has to happen. The whole story with the split personality of Odetta, Susanna, I want to fucking see all that too. But we do get a little nod to Oi, which I fucking love. There's a scene where Roland's in our world in the hospital. He got infected like he does in the book, but it's not from the Lobstrosies. It's from another creature. Doesn't lose fingers, at least yet. I think there's a scene, though, where his hand gets damaged by glass. That might play into, we're just going to leave out the Lobstrosities, which I fucking don't like. But that's fine. But regardless, he's in the hospital. They're giving him antibiotics and treating his infection. And he's watching TV, which of course he doesn't understand. And there's talking raccoons. It's I can't remember the commercial, but it's a real commercial. I've seen it. And there's talking raccoons talking about insurance or some shit. And he asks, does your world still has talking animals? He's like, no, Jake's like, no, that's a commercial. What do you mean? What do you mean still? So if you read the books, of course, that's definitely a reference to Oi. Fucking love that. Of course, really hope we go to see the real Oi at some point. And at the end, like I said, it's a beginning, middle, and end movie. If it just leave it there, it's fine. There's enough wiggle room at the end where, we can obviously have a bigger universe here. At the end, they defeat the Man in Black. He's apparently dead. The Breaker headquarters appears to be destroyed. Doesn't mean there's not more. I think the book hinted that there was several. Between the Black House and Book 7, we kind of know there's a lot more going on. So I really think it's open. I really think they can do more there if they want to continue. We also have, looks like the Man in Black's dead. He got shot. But, if you've read Stephen King, Flag apparently died quite a few times. He's a tough motherfucker. He's a sorcerer. So I don't buy that being his end. I don't know if his ultimate end should be at the hands of Mordred as is in the book. That's one of the bigger problems. I had a friend who never finished book 7 just for that reason. He fucking hated how Walter, Man in Black, died. Again, fucking spoilers. So, all that said, all these great references, including the movies and novels that aren't even really tied, are they looking to do a Stephen King cinematic universe? I think this was at least dipping their toes in the waters of, hey, you have a universe with, hey, this is the big new thing. Marvel, DC, everybody's getting on the bandwagon of having multiple movies that all kind of tie in together with a central theme. I don't see why Stephen King universe shouldn't be, since so much of it does tie together already, with the Dark Tower being one of the central centerpieces of this universe. We already know they're going to remake a lot of these. We're already getting It. I would guarantee you when It comes out, which I can't wait for, the trailer looked great. We're going to get explicit Dark Tower references in there, and maybe some other references like we did here. They're remaking The Stand, and of course, if they cast Matthew McConaughey as Flag, that fucking seals the deal right there. That one and done, and then maybe we even get Eyes. And you can keep them going. You can make Eyes of the Dragon, which you've never got a movie version of. Game of Thrones is hot. Why not? We saw Christine and Cujo, 2 movies ripe for remake because Hollywood's out of ideas anyway. So let's just remake 2 fucking good that were decent in the day, but could be done better. Just like It was a decent TV movie, but I mean, god damn, that book was so fucking good. And the movie, it's based, the TV miniseries is basically good because of Tim Curry, who's amazing and everything, and he's frightening. If it wasn't for him, that movie no one would remember it. Would have fucking sucked. So I look forward to this. This is only part 1 of It. Is only going to be the kids section, which part 2 is going to be the adults later on, I assume. And of course, you have all the other tie-in books that a lot of them never got made into movies. Of course, you continue the Dark Tower. You have the new stuff. Like I said, we've had 2 versions of The Shining, a TV miniseries, the original Kubrick classic, which King hates because he fucked up the Torrance character. Whatever. I understand him, but it's still a fucking masterpiece. But he wrote a sequel, Doctor Sleep, which is actually a pretty good book, and it gets more into The Shining, which you already have established. So I look forward to maybe we get a Doctor Sleep movie. Maybe the recent trilogy he just wrote, like the mystery detective stuff, that is kind of tied. That is tied into Doctor Sleep. There's one tie-in. Spoilers. There's a boy band that exists in both Doctor Sleep and the new trilogy. So all that ties into the Dark Tower. So that I can all bring in. But again, they said if they brought in, so they bring all this in, and we can get a few others. Maybe Insomnia, which I don't think got a movie. There's so many others. You could do remakes of some others they have done. Maybe not Tommyknockers. It wasn't the greatest. Another TV movie. King has kind of a spotty record with movies and adaptations. I think he's trying to change that now that he has more creative control. He did the JFK one was on Hulu, and it was really good. And it was helped by the fact it was a miniseries, and that's what I'd like to see more of this. Interspersed movies with miniseries. He has a deal with Hulu, put all these on Hulu, maybe HBO, maybe Netflix, wherever you do it. I think it's a really good idea, and I think they're really. I think their ideas in their head, at least, they're going to try to test the waters for a Stephen King cinematic universe. Whether or not this comes to fruition, who knows? I think a lot of it depends on how well this movie does this weekend. Because again, the critics are fucking blasting it. But I said I liked it. I've heard other people I know liked it. Hopefully, the word of mouth from this weekend is a lot of other people do like it, despite the fact that they may not know the source material. But it's just on the last note. Yeah, it's not Game of Thrones. It's it wasn't a miniseries. Well, a lot of people thought it should have gone. It's a 90-minute movie that kind of tries to really condense and encapsulate the Dark Tower and leaves out a hell of a lot, including two main characters. So, but still, it was good. I really want to see more, and hopefully we will see more. Hopefully we will see some kind of Stephen King cinematic universe. A boy can only dream. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough. Hope you enjoyed this. If you saw any other references I missed in the Dark Tower, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. I'm probably going to go see it again next week at some point. And that's all I got for now. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed.